Hi, my name is Ricardo and I am a visual effects artist. I currently work at Meta as VFX and animation lead for our creative services team right here at our studio in Los Angeles, California. Before we start, let me give you a little background about myself. My visual effects career started at a company that was called Discrete Logic. Discrete Logic were based in Montreal, Canada, and Montreal is my hometown, is where I grew up and also where I went to school. And right after I graduated university, I went to work for Discrete. I was one of their demo artists and one of their trainers. Now, Discrete was a tech company that made high-end turnkey visual effects system for the entertainment industry. And one of their flagship product was called the Flame. And the Flame was my specialty. That was the system that I demo and the system that I used to go train clients on. These proprietary systems were not cheap. They range anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 for a complete system. The system was hardware and proprietary software, and you can imagine that at those prices, it wasn't individuals purchasing them. It was companies. It was post-production facilities, studios, agencies, and so on. So when you acquired a Flame system, it usually came with some kind of training, and that was my role. Discrete used to send me to clients all over the world to train them on the Flame system, to train their artists on the Flame. Because Los Angeles is pretty much the capital of the entertainment industry, Discrete had a lot of clients here. So it allowed me to spend a lot of time in Los Angeles with these clients. They used to send me here all the time to train them. And that's what opened my eyes to the creative side of visual effects, which I absolutely loved. So after a few years at Discrete, I decided to move to Los Angeles and become a full-time Flame artist. I had no problem finding work because in those days, I'm talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, Flame artists were very much in demand. And I moved between studios as opportunities came up. Working at a different studio also gave me the opportunity to work on multiple projects and that were all different from each other. So anything from feature film to episodic TV to Super Bowl commercial and even music videos when that was a thing. Fast forward almost 30 years and I'm still in the VFX industry. I'm actually even back in tech because I work for Meta now. Now the big difference between those early days and the way we do VFX right now, it's all in the technology. It's gotten so much more efficient and faster than back in those days, and also a lot cheaper. There's no more of these $500,000 turnkey systems because the new system, desktop systems, almost leave that in the dust. And technology is what I like to focus on in this video. Specifically about AI. I know. I'm not going to start a rant about how AI is going to take my job because, well, eventually it probably will. But I want to talk about more how I use AI as just another one of my tools, just like any other the software that I use, and how you can be more efficient with some of the tools that are available in the AI world. The techniques and what I learned in those early days is still very relevant today, and that's what I'm going to be using and what I'm going to be showing you. It's just that the tools are a little different, and you're going to see how AI can be a tool that can really save you time, especially when you do the mundane stuff. And that stuff is the bread and butter of visual effects. Of course, as an artist, we all want to work on these amazing visual effects shots that include big spaceships or explosions or fantastic creatures. We get to do a lot of that, but we also get to do a lot of what's called fixing it in post. So a lot of times when they shoot on set, there's something that happens that they don't notice or that they need to fix. For example, remove cables or add something that they forgot to add when they were shooting. So that's all the invisible effects that a lot of the artists work and do all the time. And that's what we're going to be doing in this little clip. Or I don't want to call it a tutorial because it's not really a tutorial. It's more of a process. It's like what are the steps that I use to fix these shots, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be fixing a shot, a pretty ordinary shot. What it is a shot of an actor who's standing in front of a car, and he's a chauffeur. So he's wearing a suit and he's waiting for his client. But what they didn't notice is that the tie that he's wearing is a little crooked, and what happens is that they cut through other scenes. It's another angle, and this time he's got the tie straight, so there's a continuity problem. So they asked me if I could fix in the wide shots where the tie is crooked, if I can put it straight. And of course, it's not something that's new. I've done those kind of effects a million times. But this time, I did it a little differently. Actually, I did it much faster than I usually the way I do it. Because the process is, and if you do any kind of visual effects, you probably use this technique too. Is when you have to fix something, you take a frame that's from the shot that you're working on, you export it, you clean up that frame. In this case, the tie, for example, I would bring it into Photoshop, paint it out, paint a new tie that's straight, or try to find another one that matches it and put it on, and then take that clean frame, bring it back into my compositing program. In this case, we're going to use After Effects, and then we're going to put it back on the shot by tracking it, and I'm going to be using Mocha Pro for that. And that's all it is. It's pretty mundane. It's nothing exact, nothing that's going to win you any awards. But like I said, it is the bread and butter. And if we can do this fast, we can use AI to help us. We can do a lot more of those shots, and they become a lot easier. So let's get into it, and let me show you how I did that shot. Here we are in After Effects, and this is the shot that we are going to be working on and that I was talking about. Let's look at the shot in full screen and play it in a loop so we can study what are we going to be dealing with. What we are going to be working on is this part right here, which is his tie. You can see that it's a little crooked, which doesn't seem to be such a big deal. But in the same sequence, you have other shot of this gentleman, close up of him, where his tie is straight, and and you really notice that when you go from shot to shot. So that's why it's a continuity problem, and that is why we need to fix it here on these wide shots. The other thing is that we need to keep in mind is that this camera, the camera that it was shot on, is not on a tripod, and it almost looked like it's handheld. It was handheld. You can see it from the movement in the background. Also, her hand and his hand go right in front of the area we're going to be cleaning up. So that means that when we're going to be tracking, we need to create hold out mats for their hands. And also we got to remember that when we comp it back in, our clean frame is going to go in front of it. So we're going to have to roto their hands back into the shot, which is not that big of a deal because, as you can see, it goes pretty quick. It's just in that area that we have to do that. The other thing also is that, which I think is pretty important, is that the area that we're going to be cleaning up and that we're going to be tracking is the suit, the tie, the shirt, which are kind of like more organic elements. You can see how the suit is folding and is bending. So when we paint a still frame, that's going to be stiff and that won't look very natural. So we need to track also this kind of organic folding in the suit. And that's why we're going to be using Mocha Pro, because Mocha Pro has a module that's called Power Mesh that allows you to do that. So Mocha and Power Mesh is very good for doing things like if you want to put a tattoo on skin, that's what's going to fold with the skin and it's going to make it look natural. So that is the assignment. Let's start by exporting the frame that we're going to clean up in Photoshop. This first frame here looks good because we have the tie in full view. So let's export it as a still frame. We're going to be exporting not as a JPEG, but a full quality Photoshop. It's going to be best quality, which means full resolution. And let's call it crooked tie. Save, render it out, which should only render one frame. Okay, so let's go to Photoshop and clean that tie up. All right, here we are in Photoshop with the frame we just exported from After Effects. Before we start, what's always good practice and what I like to do is to create a copy of what I'm going to be working on. Like that, I still have the original. If I need to revert to it or grab a section from it, it's going to be there. Okay, so here's the copy. Now in Photoshop, we're going to be using Firefly to fix the tie. Firefly is Adobe's generative AI, which means that once you do a selection, you can a prompt will come up and you can tell it what to do in that prompt or what you want it to do with that selection and or how to fix it, so on. You just need to type in what you would like to see. So let's make a selection of the tie. Now, my selection is it's going to be a little rough, but that's fine because Firefly is smart enough to just work on the area you told it to work and not to touch the rest or just blend it in with the rest. So this is the part here that's crooked and that's the part that I want to fix. So that's good enough. Now, when it comes to the prompt itself, after doing this a few times, I realized that you have to talk to it or write to it like you're talking to a 5-year-old. Basically, you need to tell it everything you want it to do and everything you also don't want it to do. Um, and it took me a few tries, but once I got it right, what I did is I saved the prompt so I don't have to redo it like that, and I just so I can copy and paste it, and I save it as a text file, and here it is. And this is what I told. This is what worked. I set to straighten the tie. I also said no pattern on the tie because for some reason it kept putting a very visible pattern on it, and maybe there is a pattern on the tie that I can't see that it does see, but it just was just enhancing it. It didn't look good. It didn't look like the original. Also, I told it to keep the same solid gray color as the original tie. And that is because sometimes they would just create a tie that's a different color, like a light blue. And you know what? It actually looked pretty good. It looked better than this tie, but it just didn't. It wasn't like the real thing. Also, I got a little more precise when it comes to when it came where I want it to be. I said position the tie so it hides the center button and seam of the white shirt. So I want the tie to be right in front of this, which is right in the center. There's the button, there's the seam. So I'm saying that. And also to be a little more precise, I said the bottom of the tie should align with the top center button of the blazer and be behind it. So here's where the that's bottom center of the bottom of the tie is, and I want it to be right behind this button right here in the center. So that's what I made sure it understood. So let's take that and copy it. Go back to Photoshop and paste it in the prompt. So there we go, and hit generate. Now the great thing is that it only takes a few seconds, and then also it gives you more than one option, which is nice. So you can pick the one you like, and if you didn't like any of them, you can hit generate again. You don't have to type in the prompt. You can just hit generate and it will create another version, and keep going like that until you're happy. So the first one, okay, that's not terrible. Let's do this one. That one still feels crooked and it's not behind the shirt like I want it to. Ah, here's this one's better. Let's compare it to, yeah, this one looks much better. Uh, the color, the color actually works because if you look at the original, since I didn't do that selection, it just when it created it, it matched it to that. It knew to match it to that. So if I go back and forth, yeah, the color works. All right, so this is good enough to use in our composite. And what I'm going to do is just save this as a Photoshop file. So if I need to come back to it and make some changes, and it's going to keep all that information, the AI information, so I can go back and do some changes to it. But to use it in my comp, to use it in After Effects, I'm going to have to flatten the image. So basically bake this image into what it is. So there we go. So this is what I'm actually going to be bringing into After Effects. So let's save that. And we're gonna call this fixed tie instead of crooked tie, so I know that is the right one to use. Fixed tie. There we go. All right. So let's go on into After Effects. Let's bring this into After Effects and track it and comp it in. See you there. Okay, we are back in After Effects with the clip that we're going to be working on. First things first, let's bring in the frame that we just fixed in Photoshop, which I called Fixed Tie. It doesn't have an alpha channel, so I'm going to tell it to ignore it. And there it is. So let's take that still frame and drop it right into our comp. And you will notice that the only thing that changed was the tie that we fixed. Because if I turn that layer on and off, underneath is the original clip, which is parked on the first frame, which is what we exported. And if we turn the still frame on and off, you see that the only thing that changes is the tie. Now this is a still frame. If I scroll the play, if I move the playhead, you see that nothing happens. So what we need to do now is to actually take that still frame and track it to our footage, and also only use the part that changes, which is the tie, which is the fix that we did. And to do that, we're going to be using a piece of software, which is a plugin for After Effects called Mocha Pro. Now, Mocha is an amazing piece of software, and there is a version, a stripped down version that comes with After Effects. So if you go under Effects and look under Boris FX Mocha, there is Mocha AE. And Mocha AE is the standard plugin that comes in all After Effects versions. I'm going to be using a version called Mocha Pro, and we'll get into it in just a second. But Mocha AE is actually, it's Mocha Pro, but a stripped down version of it. It's excellent for doing regular 2D tracking, stabilizing, and it's much, much better than the built-in tracking and stabilizing of After Effects. But it doesn't do all the stuff that we're going to have to be doing. That's why I'm using Mocha Pro. And Mocha Pro is a standalone application, but it also comes with a bunch of plugins. Plugins for After Effects, like I'm going to be using here. There's a plugin for Premiere. There's also a plugin for Nuke, if you use Nuke for compositing. Mocha Pro has also a 3D tracker that I use with software like Unreal Engine, Cinema 4D. Now, Cinema 4D has a built-in 3D tracker, but personally, I think that the one in Mocha is much better. And the reason why is because Mocha, differently than other 3D than other trackers, it doesn't track points, it doesn't track pixels, it tracks surfaces. Basically, it tracks the whole image instead of tracking individual pixel, which you get much better results and much more accurate. So that is what we're going to be doing to the footage. We're going to be tracking it using planar tracking. So it's selected. Let's go under Effects, under Boris again, and select Mocha Pro. Now, before we go into the full Mocha Pro interface, we need to do a little bit of house cleaning or prepping beforehand. There's two ways of doing what we're going to be doing. One of them is the more traditional way, which is to take our still frame, and if you're an After Effects user, you know what this means. We take our frame and create a pre-comp out of it, and we prep it for Mocha to export its data to it. The other way that you can do it, which is I think is the faster way to do it and easier, is to do it all within Mocha, including the comping, because this is not complicated comping. We're just putting one layer on top of the of our guy. So, but we need to tell Mocha that we're going to be using that still frame to comp. So if we go under Module Render, you can select a custom insert layer. And you can pick anything that's in your comp. We only have one layer, which is this, the fix tie PSD, which is our frame. And so now Mocha knows that that's what it's going to use when it's going to do its tracking on the footage. So now we can actually go into the full Mocha interface. Now, when this launches, this interface here, it's exactly the same interface that you have if you launch the Mocha Pro application, the standalone application. You can do everything in here that you can do in a standalone, except that in the standalone, you need to export it to bring it into different programs. Here, all we need to do is just to go back in After Effects, and all that information is already in there. So there it is. Let's first pick the area that we're going to be tracking and masking. So it's this here. This is the tie. So let's add a layer, but this is a Mocha layer, into the area that we're going to be working on. So let's take it, again, this can be rough because we're going to feather it and it's going to blend right in. So let's do something like this, like that. There we go. Let's zoom. Again, like I said, it doesn't have to be very precise, but we are going to feather it, so it's going to blend right in. There we go. Okay, so that's the area we're going to track. Before we start tracking it, let's look at the footage again. Now you can see that, yeah, there's definitely his hand. Her hand, it's kind of outside, but his hand definitely goes right in the area that's going to track. And that's a problem because Mocha is going to get confused when the hand goes in front of it. It's going, well, this is different, and it's going to get all confused. So what we need to do is we need to create what's called a holdout mat for the hands. So whatever object goes in front of it, we're going to create a rough mat to tell Mocha to ignore it, to not to look at that area when it's tracking. So let's, and we don't have to do it throughout the whole sequence, just the part that goes in front of our tracking. So, okay, let's do it. Let's start with the guy. So it starts around here, right? Yeah, just before. So let's create a new layer or a new area, which is basically, it's going to be the holdout mat. And we're going to make sure that all the area that goes within where the tie is inside of that. Okay, so again, it doesn't have to be precise. As long as you don't get any of the hands, the area that's moving there in front of it, as long as you cover all of that. So there's where it starts. So this layer, we're going to say that's the endpoint, and it starts right there. And now we're going to just do this by hand. You know, we could track it, but this, I think, for what we need to do for a holdout mat, this is much faster. So it's just a rough mask or a rough holdout mask. All right. I might speed up this section here so you don't watch me doing this for the next few minutes. Okay, I think that's at that point he doesn't go back into where we're going to be tracking, so we can set that as the out point of this layer, of this holdout mat. If I scroll through it, yeah, that looks good. Whoop, here we need to add, we need to fix it here. We need to make sure that all of it is inside the holdout mat. There we go. If not, Mocha's going to get confused when it's going to track this. That part is good. All right. Let's do the woman now. And she only does it at this little section here, so we're going to start at this point. So again, I'm creating a new layer, a new holdout mat, which is just going to be for her hand over here. And that is the endpoint where it starts. So let's set that as the endpoint. And let's create some keyframes so it moves with it. Okay, I think at this point she doesn't cross it anymore, so we can set that as the out point. Let's just scroll to it. Here, that phone is within the tracking area, so Let's just move that over there. It interpolates in between. Let's just make sure that it doesn't cross again. It crosses a little bit here, but that's not a big deal. There we go. Okay. That's good. The holdout mats are done. Now, it's always a good idea to name your layers so you know what they are. So when you need to do some rearranging, you don't get confused. All right, so the first one is the layer called the tie track. Let's call that tie track, so I know what that is. Layer number 2 is the man, I believe, right? Yeah, that's the man hand. So let's call this man holdout. And the last one is the woman holdout. Okay, so now it is ready to be tracked. Now what's important is the order of where these layers are for Mocha to work. So Mocha works just like After Effects. Top layers are always in front of the layers that are at the bottom. And in this case, it's actually good because we did start with this. So the man holdout layer should be on top of the tracking layer, and the woman's holdout layer, same thing. The reason why that is we do it that way is so Mocha knows when to hold out that mat, when to ignore it. If for example, if the tie track was in front of the was on top of the holdout, then it would think that this area is in front of the hand and of both hands, and it would use the hands to track, which would be a problem. So the tie track should be behind. There we go. We can now these cogs here. It tells Mocha whether I should track it or not. Because I created keyframe, it doesn't need to track the hands because they're already animated. They're already moving. What needs to be tracked is just the tie part. So let's go to the first frame where this is basically the reference frame, the first frame. Any frame can be the reference frame. You can track back and forth if you want. So that's what's selected. We go into the track mode, and there's a few options here for that we need to set for what we're doing. Personally, it usually tracks on luminance. So basically, it looks at the darkness, how bright a pixel is. But sometimes that doesn't work quite well. Sometimes colors work better. So what I like to do, by default, it's set to luminance. I'll set it on auto. Automatically means that it looks at the image and finds what's the best thing for it to find the contrast or the difference between the pixels in there. So set that to auto. Now we're going to be tracking translation, scale, rotation, shear. Yes, shear, all of that, because that's how it's moving. There's no perspective on this, but this is the important part when we're going to be using Power Mesh, is to turn on mesh tracking. Now you can see as soon as I did mesh tracking, I selected mesh tracking or mesh, it created this automatic mesh based on the where I created my points. Now this works fine, but is not the best thing. It depends on what the case is. Personally, I like to use, instead of automatic, which is what we're doing right now, I like to use uniform. Basically, instead of creating these kind of random triangles, it creates more uniform squares. Now you can set the number of vertices or of squares that you want in here. So if we do it at 32 and say generate mesh, you can see now that it created a pretty decent dense mesh. This is if you have a lot of folding, then this, because every little point that you see here will be tracked. But for what we're doing, it doesn't need to be that dense. So we can actually make the squares or the vertices a little bigger. So let's try double that. Let's do 64 and then hit generate mesh again. Yeah, I think that's gonna work. That should be enough detail for it. I'm also gonna tell it to No, we're not using automatic, so we don't need to do adaptive contrast. You also have a smoothness slider over here. And what that means is if you have lower numbers, it's going to be looser. So something like fabric, if you have a fabric with has a lot of folding, then you want to go with a lower number. But if you go with higher numbers, it becomes stiffer. So if, again, the example of a tattoo on skin, the skin doesn't fold like fabric does, so you want to go with a higher number. Here by default it's set to 50%, and for what this fabric does, that's going to be good enough. So we're going to leave that as it is, and now we are ready to start tracking. Let's just double check. Yes, this is the only layer that we're going to track. The other layers are there, but just as holdout, and there now won't be track. We're at the first frame, so let's hit track forward, and there it goes. Now there's our holdout layers. Notice that the tracking is not getting thrown off by it because it's ignoring it. Now something that I should have done is right now we're just looking at the vertices, basically the wireframe. But what I could have done is insert the frame that we were using at the beginning, that frame that I cleaned up in Photoshop. We can preview it in here instead of previewing this wireframe. And we're going to do that right now. But before, I have to admit that this is pretty fast. I don't think I've mentioned this, but the footage that we're working with is 4K footage. This is not just regular HD. This is full on 4K, and we're looking at it at full resolution. And it goes pretty fast. Consider I'm working on a desktop machine. Okay, it is a powerful desktop machine, but it's not a $500,000 system. Okay, so let's actually insert our footage, our clean tie to see how that looks in there. So for that, we need to go into the insert module here, and we are going to pick the insert layer, which is the layer we inserted in After Effects. You saw that it changed right away. But if I go forward, what it's doing, it's distorting the whole frame because that's the full frame. We haven't masked it yet. But it's folding, or it's distorting it just like the fabric distorts. Okay, so to mask this, we just simply need to tell it to use this as a mask. So it only is going to keep that area. So if we go here and use the mat for the tie, there we go. So now it should be just the tie area in there that's moving, or that's been comped on top of it. All right, that looks pretty good. The other thing that I like to do is, if I zoom in here, and if I go a little further, like there's a bit of us, if I turn off the vertices, if I turn those, make those invisible, there's a little bit of a, well, first of all, that we're going to do in After Effects. You can see that the hands are behind it, and that's why we mask. That's why we use them as a holdout. But that's what we're going to have to roto in After Effects. But this is the part that I wanted to show you. See here, that's the seam of where our mask is. But we can fix that by just using a feather. So if we go to the tie track and go into the edge softness, now, because I am not on the first frame, I'm going to use what's called an Uber frame. An Uber frame, basically, whatever you do here, it's going to do it throughout the whole sequence. If I wouldn't select the Uber frame, it would create a keyframe in the softness there, and that's not what I want. So let's go with 3. That's good, and it's going outside. Yeah, hit set. Okay, that's, well, it helped, but it's not enough. Let's go a lot more. Let's do like 20 frames. And hit set, and yeah, that's a little smoother, maybe a little more. That doesn't look too bad. Yeah, that blends it nicely. There we go. All right, here I still see that shadow, so let's go just a little more. I'm still on Uber key, yes. Let's go a lot more. There we go. That blends nicely. It's like a feather. If you use After Effects and you use feather in After Effects, it's the same. It's the same feature. Okay, so now all we have to do is to roto these hands back. And we can do this in Mocha. Now I could do, Mocha is great for doing roto, but this is really fast. In this area, this is going to be a good section to use Adobe's built-in roto brush, because it only happens for about, half a second or so, about a second. Anyways, it goes really fast. So we're going to do it directly in After Effects. Okay, so let's go back into AE. Save this. And we are back in After Effects. Okay, so to insert, to see what we did in Mocha, because right now it's still the old tie, we need to go back to the plugin, the module, go under module render. We're going to select render. And what is it that we want to render? Well, let's see. It is the insert cutout. No, the insert composite, not the cutout. The cutout would be just the tie area. But here we want the full composite. So there we go. There's our composite with the blending. And if I do a RAM preview, so if I hit play, you can see that we are watching the same thing that we were watching in Mocha. Again, we're watching this in 4K, full resolution. So considering it's doing all of that, it's pretty fast. Okay, so this is the area here where we're gonna have to fix the hand. You saw that it went behind the behind the tie, which breaks the illusion, of course. So, all right, let's stop it there. Okay, this looks good. So it's here. We are working in 4K. So let's zoom in to see exactly where we need to roto. Okay, this looks like right here. That would be the endpoint. So, well, first of all, let's duplicate the layer, because this is going to go on top of it. And that is going to be where it's going to start. So I'm going to set a little marker over here so it tells me where I need to trim it. It's under marker right here. Add marker. So yeah, and set that as an endpoint. Okay, so from there to all the way to here, this would be the last frame. Now the reason why I'm trimming this is because we're going to use the roto brush to extract the hand so we can put it on top of it, and that it needs to process that. So the less frames you give it, the faster it's going to be. Okay, so we duplicated this, but this still has the proper tie in it because it still has the Mocha Pro plugin. So we're just going to get rid of it, and we go back to the original. So it's just this section from here to here. Well, I didn't need to put that marker. Anyways, this is the section that we're gonna use the roto brush on, and we're gonna use it just on the hands part, whatever's going in front of the tie. So let's double click to go into the layer window and go to the endpoint, which is here, and then use the roto brush to give it a rough outline, give After Effects a rough outline of what we want it to roto. The roto brush automatically detects edges, so you don't have to do it super precise. You just got to give it kind of like guide it to where you want it. So we want this, we want this, we want this, we want his finger, and we're going to do her at the same time. So her hand, including the phone. So look at all of that, and let's do part of his sleeve too. Okay, and then it creates an outline or the roto of the roto we want. Now this is only one frame, and we don't need to do this in every frame. It will automatically look for those edges. So here you can see that I need to clean it up by holding the Alt key and say, okay, do not include that in your roto. So again, it doesn't have to be super precise because we're going to feather that. We're going to use the roto feather tool to blend that in a little better, especially if there's some motion blur. And is this part of the phone? This area here? Yeah, it looks like it is. So let's include that too. And not this. Just tell it to get rid of that. Yeah, that's good. All right, so that's the first frame. Let's move forward. We only have a few frames. Again, it's got a process, but it's pretty fast. Again, considering it is 4K. Well, this is not a big deal. It doesn't matter that it's grabbing this, but I'm just gonna, just for good practice, I'm gonna take that off because it doesn't need that. It doesn't need to process that. Let's just take that off like that. That's good. This, again, it's outside the area that we're gonna clean, so I'm not worried about that. Go forward, forward. So far so good. It's looked like it's losing the top of the phone here. So let's give it a little help. Yeah. Again here. The more you help it, the better it gets as you go forward. Not this. Okay. Whoop. This should be within the roto, so include that. Same here. This is the top of the phone. Whoop. See, it couldn't detect the edge, so we're going to help it again here. Say that this here, you don't need to include. Here's part of the hand. Yep, that's looking good. Only a few more frames. This here shouldn't be there. This is all looking good. Yeah. Yes. There's a lot of motion blur. Include this. Well, this is outside the area that we cleaned, so, but again, just for good measure, I'm going to include it. And I believe that is the last frame. Yeah. Good, so it's got that in its preview, in its RAM preview. Now we're going to go back to the first frame. And we're going to smooth this out and feather it just because there's motion blur, and that's just going to blend it a little better. So we're going to change from roto brush tool to refine edge tool. And this is a good size. We're just going to go around the area that it's rotoing, because that's the only area it's going to be looking at, and ask for it to smooth that out. Up to there is good. Yeah, you can see what it's doing internally, and the bottom part here too. Again, I'm only doing this on the first frame, and it will try to detect the rest automatically. This is really not necessary in this part, but we'll do it anyways. Okay, move forward. The color part, it's the part that's going to be matted, that's going to be inside the roto. And the black area, these black areas are going to be invisible, and these gray area is going to blend in. Just does a pretty good job at detecting the motion blur. And so this is good for, like, if you're going to be trying to roto hair, which is an absolute nightmare to do. This is a really good tool for that. Now we're not going to worry about this because, again, where black is, that means it's invisible. So it's not going to do anything to that. It's going to ignore it. Yeah. This is all good. Okay. Yeah. So now this is in its RAM preview, but for it to work properly, and so you don't have to wait and for this to process all the time, you can hit the freeze button. And the freeze button, it's basically baking this into a file, into its cache file. So like that, it's not going to calculate it every time you get to these frames. Now, if I was going to make a change, I need to unfreeze it because it needs to do it all over again. But because that's why I went frame by frame to make sure there wasn't anything that was wrong. And it's done. So let's go back to the front, to our main comp. And if I solo this, you can see what the roto brush did. So it's got that nice blend, which is the motion blur that's on it. And if we put it back in the comp, there it is. There's our good tie, and there's our roto right in front of it. So let's fit it up to 100. Let's just preview from this point here to this point here to see how that looks. It's putting it in its RAM preview, and it's going to play it back in real time. There we go. All right, that looks pretty good. So there we go. If we go to the beginning, when it's green like this, it means that it's already in a RAM preview, so it doesn't have to recalculate. So I'm going to set this as the end point, and this is the beginning point. Again, don't forget that we're watching this in full resolution. Let's actually go full screen on this viewer and play it back. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. The tie was fixed. It is not crooked anymore. Now, again, this is nothing that is any different the way I've done things for years, except that the part that would have taken me probably a long time to clean up this in Photoshop, I only did it in a few minutes. And that is where it really makes a difference. Before I sign out, I'd like to show you one more thing, and it's not a full process, but just the before and after on the same project. So let me import the clip. I'm going to show you the before and the after. It's these two clips right here. Let's import them in and drop them into a comp so we can watch both of them at this, one after the other. Okay, so that is the after. Here's the original, the before. If I play it back, you can see that it's from the same scene. Actually, this is the car that the characters are in, but it's a Mercedes. You can obviously see the logo and see it and see that it's a Mercedes. So I was asked if I could change that or remove the Mercedes logo for whatever reason it couldn't be in there. So I did exactly the same technique. I took this first frame, exported it, then brought it into Photoshop, and just selected this area here. And I asked Firefly if it could remove the Mercedes logo and replace it with a similar logo with the letter Z inside, with the same type of metal and so on. And this is what it came up with. So I brought this back into After Effects and tracked it exactly the same way that we did the tie, and it looks pretty convincing. Nobody could tell that this was a comped in. Now, I didn't use any kind of power mesh on this because it doesn't fold. This is just a using planar tracker. I used a bicubic effect, and it just tracked it in like this. This was pretty fast to do. Again, saving me so much time without having to do this in Photoshop by hand. The fact that I can do that, it allowed me to do a few of these shots per day as opposed to doing it just one or two, because it takes so long to create these clean frames. Anyways, I hope that this was enjoyable for you guys, and I know it was a little long, but I appreciate you staying all the way till the end. And if you have any questions, please leave them in a comment. Or if you're interested that I take a deeper dive in some of this stuff that I've worked on and go in more detail into some of these software, please ask, and I will do my best to do that. Again, thank you for listening, and take care.